Imagine a time long, long ago. A time before history books were written as we know them. Picture a world bathed in the warm, golden light of the Mediterranean sun. This is ancient Greece. It was a land of rugged mountains that tumbled down to meet a sparkling, wine-dark sea. Islands were scattered across the water like jewels. People lived in powerful city-states: Athens, Sparta, Troy. These were places of great thinkers, fierce warriors, skilled artists. Life was different then. It was a time when gods and goddesses were believed to walk among mortals, meddling in their lives for sport or for favor. It was a world where heroes were forged in the crucible of impossible challenges. In this ancient land, stories were everything. They were not just for entertainment, they were the internet, the library, the classroom, all rolled into one. Stories explained the world. They told people why the seasons changed. They explained the mysteries of the sky at night. They taught children about courage, loyalty, and the dangers of pride. These tales were passed down from one generation to the next, sung by traveling bards in the halls of kings and in bustling public squares. These storytellers or rhapsodies would pluck at the strings of a lyre. Their voices would rise and fall, weaving intricate tales of adventure, tragedy, and triumph for all to hear. This was a world where myth and reality were deeply intertwined. Heroes performed superhuman feats, monsters lurked in the dark corners of the map. A journey across the sea was not just a physical challenge, it was a spiritual test, a battle against monstrous creatures and the unpredictable whims of powerful deities. The Greeks saw the divine in everything. A sudden storm at sea? That was the wrath of Poseidon, god of the oceans. A brilliant idea? A gift from Athena, the goddess of wisdom. This belief system shaped their understanding of destiny, fate, and the very meaning of a human life, creating a rich tapestry of stories. It is from this vibrant, myth-soaked world that one of the greatest stories ever told emerges. It is a story that has echoed through the corridors of time for nearly 3,000 years. A story of a long war, a clever hero, and the 10-year journey it took him to get back home. This tale is a cornerstone of Western literature. It has captivated audiences for millennia, a testament to the power of a good story to transcend its own time and speak to the core of our shared human experience. This is the story of the Odyssey, and it all begins in this magical and dangerous world of ancient Greece. So who gave us this incredible story? Who was the master storyteller behind this epic adventure? The name that has come down to us through the ages is Homer. But Homer is a figure shrouded in as much mystery as the myths he is said to have composed. We know very little for certain about him. Tradition tells us he was a blind poet. He is often depicted as an old man with a long white beard, his sightless eyes turned inward as if seeing the grand stories unfolding in his mind. The image is powerful, a man who could not see the world around him, yet who created one of the most vivid and enduring literary worlds of all time. The question of who Homer really was is called the Homeric question. Scholars have debated it for centuries. Was he a single, brilliant poet who composed both the Iliad and the Odyssey? Or was Homer a name given to a long tradition of oral poets? Perhaps these epics were not written by one person at all. Maybe they were a collection of many smaller stories stitched together over generations by countless anonymous bards. We may never know the true answer. The evidence from so long ago is scarce. But whether Homer was one man or many, his name represents the genius that gave these epic poems their final, masterful form. Think about what it would take to create such a work. In a time before widespread writing, these enormous poems were composed to be memorized and performed. The Odyssey alone has over 12,000 lines of poetry. A bard would have to hold this entire epic in his memory. He would need to recall every character, every plot twist, every monster, every divine intervention. It is an incredible feat of memory and artistry. The poems use a specific rhythm and recurring phrases, known as epic formulas, which likely helped the poets remember the vast narrative as they performed it for hours or even days on end for their enraptured audiences. Regardless of the historical debates, the name Homer stands for something monumental. He, or the tradition he represents, is the fountainhead of Western literature. He is the first and perhaps greatest of the epic poets. His work set the standard for storytelling. He crafted characters that feel real and complex, even to us today. He explored timeless themes of struggle, perseverance, the meaning of home, and the complex relationship between gods and mortals. Homer is not just a name from a history book, he is the original architect of the epic journey, the ghostwriter for heroes and gods, and the voice that first sang the Odyssey into existence. Every great fire starts with a tiny spark. The spark that ignited the Trojan War wasn't armies or land. It began at a party. A wedding, to be precise. The sea nymph Thetis was marrying a mortal man named Peleus. All the gods and goddesses of Olympus were invited to the grand celebration. Well, almost all of them. Eris, the goddess of discord, was pointedly left off the guest list. As you can imagine, the goddess of strife was not best pleased about being snubbed. So, she decided to do what she did best. Stir up trouble in a truly epic fashion. Eris crafted a beautiful solid gold apple. On its gleaming surface, she inscribed just 2 words, "For the fairest." Then she crashed the wedding and rolled this golden apple among the guests. It came to a stop at the feet of 3 of the most powerful goddesses: Hera, the queen of the gods; Athena, the goddess of wisdom; and Aphrodite, the goddess of love. Immediately a furious argument erupted. Each goddess claimed the apple was meant for her. The argument threatened to tear Olympus apart, and Zeus, wisely, wanted no part in making the decision. To settle the matter, Zeus appointed a mortal to be the judge. His choice fell upon a young handsome shepherd prince named Paris, who was living in the wilderness near the city of Troy. The 3 goddesses appeared before him in all their divine glory, each demanding he choose her as the fairest. But they didn't rely on their looks alone. They resorted to bribery. Hera offered him power. She promised to make him the king of all Europe and the king of all Asia. Athena offered him wisdom and glory in battle. She promised to make him the most renowned warrior in the world. He would be victorious in every conflict he ever faced. But then came Aphrodite's turn. She made a much simpler and far more tempting offer. She promised Paris the love of the most beautiful mortal woman in the world. This woman was Helen, the wife of Menelaus, the king of Sparta. For the young Prince Paris, the choice was easy. He cared little for power or for the glory of war. He was ruled by his heart, or perhaps a more junior organ. He handed the golden apple to Aphrodite. In that single moment he secured her favor, but also earned the eternal burning hatred of Hera and of Athena. This seemingly small choice, this judgment made by a shepherd on a hillside, set in motion a chain of events that would lead to unimaginable bloodshed. True to her word, Aphrodite arranged for Paris, now a prince of Troy, to sail to Sparta. Menelaus welcomed him with the sacred rites of hospitality, but Paris betrayed that trust. He and Helen fled, taking much of Menelaus's treasure and sailing for Troy. When Menelaus returned, his grief turned to fury. He went to his brother Agamemnon, who saw an opportunity for conquest. Agamemnon invoked an old oath, forcing all the great kings and heroes of Greece to join his cause. A great army gathered, and a fleet of 1,000 ships set sail to bring Helen back and to burn the city of Troy to the ground. But Troy's walls were impenetrable. For 10 long years the war raged on in a bloody, grinding stalemate. Brute force had failed. It was Odysseus, the man of many turns, who conceived the final, audacious plan. They would build a giant wooden horse as a supposed offering to the gods, hide their best men inside, and pretend to abandon the war. The Trojans, overjoyed, ignored the warnings of their priests and prophets and dragged the gift of their enemies into the heart of their city. That night, while the city slept in a drunken stupor, the trap was sprung. The hidden soldiers emerged and opened the gates to the waiting Greek army. It was not a battle, it was a massacre. By sunrise, the great city of Troy was a smoking ruin. The war was finally over. With Troy smoldering in ruins behind them, Odysseus and his fleet of 12 ships set sail for home. The mood was triumphant. After 10 years of brutal war, the victorious Greeks were finally heading back to their wives, their children, their kingdoms. The journey should have taken a few weeks, but the gods, angered by the sack of Troy, had other plans. Their first stop was a fatal misstep. Driven by lingering greed, they sacked the city of the Cicones, only to be driven back to their ships with heavy losses. As they neared home, a terrible storm blew them off course for 9 days, pushing them past the familiar maps of men and into a world of myth and monsters. Their first stop was the land of the Lotus Eaters, a mysterious people who offered a dangerous kind of peace. Odysseus sent a scouting party inland. The natives greeted them kindly and offered them their special food, the fruit of the lotus plant. The moment they tasted it, all their sorrows and longing for home vanished. All they wanted was to stay on that island forever, eating the lotus fruit. When they did not return, Odysseus went in search of them, and found them in a trance. They refused to leave, having completely forgotten their purpose. Realizing the lotus killed the will, not the body, Odysseus had to act. He and his loyal men dragged the protesting sailors back and tied them to the ships. They rowed away with all their might, escaping a fate that was perhaps worse than death, the complete loss of self. Sailing on, they came to the land of the Cyclops. Driven by his insatiable curiosity, Odysseus went ashore to explore. They found a massive cave, but its owner, the one-eyed giant Polyphemus, returned and trapped them inside. The giant laughed at their pleas for hospitality, then grabbed 2 of the men and devoured them. Direct confrontation was impossible. Odysseus relied on his brain. He offered the giant his potent wine, which the monster greedily drank. The clever hero replied, "My name is Nobody." Once the giant passed out, they took a sharpened stake they had prepared and drove it deep into the Cyclops' single eye, blinding him. His roars brought other Cyclops, but when they asked who was hurting him, he could only scream back, "Nobody is hurting me." For their final escape, Odysseus tied his men to the bellies of the giant's sheep. The blind monster let his flock out, feeling their backs but never discovering the men hidden beneath. But as they escaped, Odysseus's pride got the better of him. He shouted his real name to the giant, who then prayed to his father Poseidon, god of the sea, to curse Odysseus and make his journey home an impossible ordeal. After their harrowing escape, they came to the island of Aeolus, master of the winds, who hosted them for a month. As a gift, Aeolus bottled all the storm winds in a bag, leaving only a gentle west wind to guide them home. For 9 days they sailed, and on the 10th, Ithaca was in sight. Believing his troubles were over, Odysseus finally slept. But his crew, greedy and suspicious, thought the bag was filled with treasure. While their captain slept, they opened it. Instantly, a hurricane of winds erupted, blowing their ships all the way back across the sea, undoing all their progress. Ashamed, Odysseus begged for help once more, but Aeolus, seeing him as a man cursed by the gods, cast him out. Their next stop was even more disastrous. In the land of the Laestrygonians, a race of giant cannibals, they were ambushed. The giants destroyed 11 of the 12 ships, spearing the men like fish. Only Odysseus's own ship, which he had shrewdly moored outside the harbor, escaped the massacre. With just 1 ship left, they came to Aea, the island of the beautiful and dangerous sorceress, Circe. A scouting party found her palace, where she welcomed them with drugged food and wine. Once they had eaten, she tapped them with her wand and turned them all into pigs, herding them into a sty. Odysseus went alone to confront her, but was met by the god Hermes, who gave him a magical herb, moly, to make him immune to her spells. Following Hermes' instructions, Odysseus overpowered the sorceress, forcing her to restore his men to their human form. Bested, Circe became a gracious host, and Odysseus and his men stayed on her island for a full year, lost in comfort and pleasure. When his crew finally reminded him of their quest, Odysseus resolved to leave. Circe agreed, but told him he first had to complete a terrifying task. He must journey to the land of the dead and consult the ghost of the blind prophet Tiresias. Following her instructions, he performed a ritual sacrifice at the edge of the world to summon the spirits of the dead. The blood drew the ghosts up from the underworld, weak, fluttering shades. Odysseus stood his ground, a living man guarding the way. He first allowed the prophet Tiresias to drink, who then foretold the rest of his journey. He warned him above all else not to harm the sacred cattle of the sun god, Helios, or his entire crew would be destroyed. He also foretold the trouble waiting at home, a palace full of suitors, and the bloody revenge Odysseus would have to exact. Then, Odysseus spoke with the ghost of his own mother, who had died of a broken heart waiting for him. He spoke with the ghost of Agamemnon, who warned him of betrayal at home, having been murdered by his own wife upon his return. He even saw the great Achilles, who told him he would rather be the lowest servant on earth than a king among the dead. The journey gave him vital knowledge, but at a terrible cost to his soul. Returning from the land of the dead, Odysseus was a changed man. Circe gave him final warnings for the deadly path ahead. The first challenge was the Sirens, monstrous creatures whose enchanting song lured sailors to their deaths on the jagged rocks. Following Circe's advice, Odysseus plugged his crew's ears with beeswax so they could not hear the deadly song. But his curiosity compelled him to listen. He had his men tie him securely to the mast with strict orders not to release him. As they passed, the song washed over him, promising knowledge and power. He screamed and struggled to be free, but his men held fast and rowed on. They survived only to face an even more terrifying and impossible choice. On one side of the strait lived Scylla, a hideous six-headed monster who would snatch sailors from the decks of passing ships. On the other side was Charybdis, a monstrous whirlpool that would swallow a whole ship and its crew entirely. Circe had advised him to sail closer to Scylla. "Better to lose 6 men," she had said, "than your whole ship and all your crew." As Odysseus steered the ship, keeping his men distracted by the terror of Charybdis, Scylla struck. The monster snatched 6 of his best men from the deck. Odysseus heard their screams as they were lifted into the air, calling his name one last time. He would later call it the most pitiful thing he had ever seen on his travels. They survived, but at a terrible, gut-wrenching cost. Battered and grieving, they next came to the island of the sun god. Odysseus, remembering the prophecies, made his men swear an oath not to harm the sacred cattle that grazed there, but relentless storms trapped them on the island for a month. Their food ran out, and the men began to starve. While Odysseus was away praying, his men, led by the mutinous Eurylochus, decided to break their oath, arguing it was better to die from a god's wrath than from starvation. They slaughtered the sacred cattle and began to feast. But terrible omens followed. The meat on the spits bellowed as if it were still alive. The sun god Helios demanded vengeance from Zeus, who promised that justice would be done. As soon as they set sail, Zeus unleashed his fury. A single thunderbolt shattered the ship, killing every last man of the crew for their sacrilege. Only Odysseus, who had not partaken, survived. He clung to a piece of wreckage, alone and adrift. For 9 days he drifted, before finally washing ashore on the island of the nymph Calypso, a prisoner of her love for 7 long years. After 20 long years, Odysseus finally sets foot on Ithaca. But his homecoming is not triumphant. He is alone, and does not even recognize his own land. Athena appears, and to help him reclaim his kingdom, transforms him into an old, frail beggar so he may enter his palace and assess the situation in secret. In his own hall, he is insulted and assaulted by the arrogant suitors. He endures it all, his rage hidden beneath the frail disguise. The first to recognize him is his faithful dog, Argos, who dies upon seeing his master one last time. Later, his old nurse, Eurycleia, recognizes him by a familiar scar. He fiercely swears her to secrecy. The net begins to close. Penelope, ever clever, announces a final test for the suitors. Whoever can string Odysseus's great bow and shoot an arrow through 12 axes will win her hand. One by one, the suitors try and fail. Not one of them is strong enough to even bend the bow. Then the beggar asks for a turn. Amid the suitors' mockery, he takes the bow and with ease, strings it. He fires. The arrow flies true. The test is over. The king has returned. "The contest is over," he declares. "Now I will aim at another mark." He, Telemachus, and 2 loyal servants slaughter all 108 suitors. But Penelope is not yet convinced. She tests this stranger with a secret only she and her husband would know, ordering their unmovable bed to be moved. At his angry, detailed response, her defenses crumble. She runs to him, and after 20 years, the king is finally reunited with his queen. And so, our journey alongside the great Odysseus comes to an end. The hero is home. Yet a story like the Odyssey is never truly over. It is a song first sung nearly 3,000 years ago, and it has never faded into silence. It is the original blueprint for virtually every adventure story ever told. Its DNA can be found in everything from The Lord of the Rings to Star Wars. Beyond its influence, the Odyssey endures because it functions as a powerful mirror, reflecting our own internal struggles and journeys. The monsters Odysseus faces are potent symbols for the challenges we all encounter. The Cyclops is the insurmountable obstacle. The sirens are the empty promises that lead us to ruin. But at the very heart of this epic lies a simple, powerful, and profoundly human concept: the idea of home. It is the thought of his wife and son that gives him the strength to reject a goddess's offer of immortality. He chooses a finite life of meaning over an eternal life of empty pleasure. This powerful theme resonates with us today. In a world that can feel disconnected, the Odyssey reminds us of the importance of putting down roots and fighting for the people and places that define us. It tells us that no matter how far we wander, the journey back to ourselves, back to the people who love us, is the most heroic journey of all. Our journey together has been the map. The real adventure awaits you in the pages of Homer's original work. There you will feel the full power of the poet's language. You will hear the haunting beauty of the siren's song. You will feel the profound sorrow of Odysseus in the underworld. So, the next time you are looking for a story to lose yourself in, pick up the Odyssey. Turn to the first page and read that immortal opening line. "Sing to me of the man Muse, the man of many turns. The ship is ready, the wind is at your back, your own Odyssey awaits."